Hello, and welcome to Booked on Shalom World TV, where we introduce Christian books. I'm your host, Clare Hinshaw. Today we are speaking with Mark Joseph, the author of Overwhelming Pursuit: Stop Chasing Your Life and Live. Mark is Vice President of the Office of Outreach and Evangelization at Franciscan University of Steubenville. He and his team share the love of Christ with tens of thousands of people every year. He blogs, speaks, and helps men and women who feel overwhelmed by life struggles to understand that they are made for greatness. Well, Mark, thank you again for joining us. We're delighted to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'd like to kind of jump right in the deep end with your book. I think the most impactful part of the book is you really become very vulnerable, sharing your own story of tragedy and conversion. And I'm curious to know, was that difficult to share, and why did you think it was important to do so?
It's a joke between my wife and I. She says that I'm nothing if not vulnerable. She can't believe what I actually share with people. Before I had my conversion, I thought, woe is me, I'm the only one that's experiencing these things. And once having my conversion, I learned that we all experience very similar things, but we just don't talk about it, right? We isolate ourselves. We become these islands unto ourselves, and we don't share it. And I just thought it was incredibly important to be vulnerable, to let people know who I truly am, that I hurt just like they do, and really to give them insight into the journey that the Lord had me on, the tragedies, and then how he pulled me out of those tragedies to live this life of peace, joy, and fulfillment.
Yeah, well, you did a great job with that. I have to tell you, it made the book so much more real for me reading that. But the overarching focus of the book is on this idea of, the experience, the common human experience of being overwhelmed. And I'm curious to hear from you. Do you think that that is a more recent phenomenon kind of brought on by our modern culture, or is this something that human beings have always experienced?
I think the answer is both. I think that, what I point out in the book is that the way we come to be overwhelmed is from our youth and growing up believing that we have to earn the love of other people, right? The more better we perform, the more love we perceive that we receive. I refer to that as conditional love, which then leads to lack of self-love, which then leads to fear, right? Which prevents us from being, doing, and trying all that we're called to, using our God-given gifts and meeting our full potential. And that's what puts us on this hamster wheel, which is the cover of my book, trying to make it go faster and faster, trying to keep up with the world to succeed in these things that the world tells us we need to do or need to achieve to be happy, right? So that's the concept of being overwhelmed. And I think that, has been around for many, many, many generations. I think, though, to answer your inferred question, it's gotten worse. With social media and these devices and everything, these smart devices, we've never been more connected, but we've never been, and at the same time, never been more isolated, right? So I think it really helps to permeate this idea of being overwhelmed, and just makes everything that much more challenging. There are tons and tons of things to do. The pace is frenetic in our lives. There's never enough time. And I think technology adds to that. I think the increased level of competitiveness adds to that. So I think there's a whole lot to it. So to answer your question, it's existed for a long time, but it has become exacerbated over the last several years.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you referenced that hamster wheel. I have to tell you, I love that image on the cover of the book. I think that was just perfect. But on a practical note, something that I really appreciated about the book was at the end of every chapter, you provide both reflection questions, but also action items for the reader. And I thought that was a really great practical application of the book. I'd love to know if you have any tips for the readers on how best to use those to kind of get the most out of it.
Yeah, we provide a little instruction at the beginning of the book, and I really, coach people to use the book as a resource where they're going through it, praying through different areas, reflecting on it. There's a notes section at the end of each chapter. And as you indicated, there are those reflective questions so that they can really do a deep dive and try to understand these issues in their own lives. As you indicated earlier, I tell a lot of my story, but my hope there is that they can gain some insights into what their story is and how their story is impacting their lives. So in working with my editor, and that was a great experience, I was published by Our Sunday Visitor, and she and I came up with this concept of really using the book as a guide in how you resolve these things in your own life.
Oh, I love that idea. That's so great that you're not just reading the book, but it's a real journey, which I think you kind of
Right.
make reference to towards the end, where you talk about kind of building this new way of life. And I'll mention that again in a few minutes. But, another practical element is you get into these steps to open one's heart to God and to his direction in your life. And one of the steps that I found very interesting was you talk about the importance of finding and becoming part of a vibrant Christian community. I'm curious to hear from you why you think, community with other human beings can be helpful for or even necessary for our relationship with God.
I think that we're made for friendship, we're made for authentic relationship, and we're made for community. I think that one of our biggest challenges is in isolating ourselves and thinking that we're so unique in these things that we experience. I think God created us for community. I believe it's scriptural, and He wants us to be among other people. The great commandments are, love God your Father with your whole heart, your whole mind, your whole soul, and your whole strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. God intended for us to be with others, right? And He wants us to be loving our neighbors, and He wants us to be in a position to be loved by others, which is the only way we're going to be the best version of ourselves. So I think community is critical. I'm a huge fan, a huge advocate of small faith-based groups. And I'm also a fan of larger communities of people to help us grow in our faith and really help us feel as though we're not alone going through this life.
If I could just pick up on that a little bit, what would you say the unique benefits are to each of those, the small versus the large communities?
Well, as I indicated, before my conversion, I thought, woe is me, I'm the only one experiencing these things. And once I had my conversion, I got into a men's group where I had these brothers in Christ, right? Distant enough not to have an agenda. Oftentimes family has an agenda, but close enough to love me, to teach me, to pray with me, and to hold me accountable. And it was life-changing. I mean, first of all, just to understand that I wasn't the only one experiencing these challenges in life. They say misery loves company. I think there's some truth to that. It's good to know that we're not unique in our challenges, right? And then just having the camaraderie, having other people speak into your life and having you be in a position to speak into others' lives to help them in doing what they're doing. I think a great example of larger community is our conferences at Franciscan University of Steubenville. And I don't think that there's many experiences like going to one of those conferences surrounded literally by hundreds and hundreds, sometimes thousands of people worshiping our Lord, whether it's during the times of praise and worship or the celebration of the Mass or a talk or whatever. But being in a large community, being affirmed by that, knowing there are others that believe what you believe, right? And what the church is about truth. So a lot of times in today's world, we need that validation and being surrounded by those just to let us know that we're in the right place, doing the right things, not only to help ourselves be better in this life, but to help others around us as well.
I love that you brought up Franciscan. As you know, I'm a graduate of Franciscan myself, and I know exactly what you're talking about. And that community, that large community from Franciscan, knowing that exists has really sustained me even in my adult life when you don't have quite so large a community around, but just knowing that exists is so helpful.
I was just going to say, I refer to Franciscan University as the bubble.
Mhm.
Right. And with what I do at the university, I part of the conference office is part of my operation. I get to travel around to go to conferences around the country. And as you well know, Claire, in graduating from the university, we have alumni in virtually every state in the country.
Mhm.
And it's the extended bubble. And I love the bubble. It's a great place to be. But what the bubble is all about is community, right? These like-minded people who are committed to the Lord, doing the Lord's work, and it's just a fabulous place to be. And again, it's affirming, right? It makes us feel connected. It makes us feel like we're part of a bigger thing.
Oh, I love that. Well, as we come towards the end of our interview time, I wanted to ask you something that comes up at the end of the book, where you talk about how we can fall into the trap of going back to our old way of thinking, our success driven focus, even as we're trying to kind of build this new way of life while we're journeying through the book. Do you have any tips for how to avoid that kind of fallback?
Yeah, go to the cross. I just think it requires prayer. It requires a commitment to our faith. It's soaking in the love of Jesus. We have a particularly busy time at the university right now, and I'm working very hard at the moment, and I'm working at a pace that can't be sustained. In fact, I had a meeting with my boss today, and we were talking about this, and I'm just trying to go deeper into prayer, really investing in that effort and staying close to Jesus, looking at some different reflections, reading different types of scripture, and just helping me to stay focused on Him, which is the more important thing than these worldly things that we can be sucked into in life. So it's easy, or what's the expression? It's simple but not easy,
Yeah.
right? But to me, that's where my concentration needs to be, on Jesus, what He's done for us, understanding His unconditional love, and doing His work. And the only way I'm going to do that is to really dig in and be soaked in His love, and feel His grace, to be able to move forward and do it.
Well, that makes so much sense as soon as you say it. But yeah, as you say, it's simple but not necessarily easy. It's one of the easiest things to forget, but also the most important.
Right. Right. I'm reading from the preface of the book, which is called Author's Note. All of us want to live good lives. We want to experience success, to be happy, and to feel love. The problem is most of us don't know how to achieve these goals. So we pursue prominence, possessions, pleasure, and fulfillment in our personal relationships, thinking these things will satisfy us. Probably not unlike you, I fully bought into these false answers for years, working very hard to succeed, and objectively speaking, accomplished much over a period of time. Then tragedy struck. I lost my family as I knew it, as well as the business I had spent so many years building. In hindsight, I was just as overwhelmed when things seemed to be going well as when things turned really bad. It just felt different. During the good times, it was all about the pace, running, running, running. There was always too much to do and never enough hours in the day. It was overwhelming, but because I felt as if I was in control, I hardly noticed it. And then in the bad times, I was exhausted, deflated, frustrated, and very aware of just how overwhelmed I truly was. It was then, when my life reached the point of crisis, that I began to learn the lessons that have benefited me beyond belief. I was forced to my knees, and I experienced true conversion. As I have learned how to remove the shackles that the world puts on us, I've been blessed with profound freedom, peace, joy, and fulfillment. I'm so excited by what I've found for myself that I'm committed to sharing it with others. My situation is anything but unique, and over my years of ministry, I found that this message deeply resonates with people from many, many different walks of life. So I've written this book in the hope of helping as many people as possible to find the same freedom I have found, freedom from the false promises of happiness that keep so many of us overwhelmed, freedom to live deeply rewarding lives of peace, joy, and fulfillment. Whether you're aware of it or not, you were made for greatness. I would say that from my earliest years, my experience of language having power would be with my father. My father was always bigger than life to me, and I had a very special relationship with him, and I hung on his words, his affirmation. I knew that I was loved unconditionally by my father and my mother, but at the same time, what he had to say and how he had to say it to me were always very important and very impactful. Well, I've only written one book, so it's not that I've researched tons and tons of things for tons of books. The book that I wrote was a 6-year endeavor, and it was based on my life. And then when I got with my editor, she shared with me that it really needed to stand on its own, and then bring my life into it, examples from my life to make various points. And that's when I dug in and did the research on various topics or various issues within the book. So I would say, to answer the question, my research took place concurrent with writing the book, having done the outline, vetted that with her, and then determining where I was going to go in terms of flow with the book, which dictated the type of research that I needed to do. Yeah, I have two that jump right off the page at me. The first is Rhythm of Life by Matthew Kelly. I love that book. Everything that Matthew Kelly writes and speaks on really speaks to me. I think his brilliance is in his simplicity. I used to buy that book by the dozen and give it to people. So I still point to that book for many things in relation to faith. The other book that I absolutely love is Let the Fire Fall, which was written by a past president of Franciscan University of Steubenville, his name being Father Michael Scanlon. And it is just a great, great read. Father Mike went to Harvard Law School. He was Navy JAG. He had a dream of being chief of staff in the White House, and then felt a call to become a Catholic priest, ultimately ending up being the president of Franciscan University of Steubenville. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. His life was fascinating, and it's really proof, true indication of what can happen in one's life in surrendering to our Lord. So I recommend both of them very highly. Story is what sells, and I don't mean sells in terms of revenue, but story speaks to people, right? And I have, I do a fair amount of speaking myself, and I've really studied the craft. Given what I do at the university, I know the best of the best Catholic authors and speakers in the country, and I get to witness them doing their thing, perfecting their craft. So I get to look at that, I get to study that, and I get to try to emulate that. And no matter what it is, whether it's something is related to our faith or whether it's something secular, if you want somebody to remember a point, to really take something home with them, deliver the message in story. So that's what I've learned, and that's what I practice. I think the importance of healing in our lives. In my book, I go into great detail in terms of the tragedies that I suffered, and I thank God for those tragedies every single day, because I know that I wouldn't be who I am today nor doing what I'm doing if it weren't for all of those experiences. I think everything happens for a reason, according to God's grand plan. We might not understand it in the moment, but it's for a greater good, and it's for His glory. I think one thing that people often skip over in this process, and I identify the process that the Lord took me through, which was conversion, then healing, and then growing in faith. I think one thing people would love to skip over is this healing piece, because it's tough. It's challenging. But we all need to heal from whatever wounds have been created in our lives. And we all experience them. We all have tragedy. We all have wounds. We all have challenges in our lives. So I think the most important lesson I learned, and what I got most out of writing the book, was this idea of healing.
Well, Mark, thank you once again for joining us. It's been really a delight having you on.
Claire, thank you. It's been great being with you, an alumnus of Franciscan University of Steubenville. Thank you, and God bless you.
Hello, everyone. I just wanted to take a few moments to share about the book Overwhelming Pursuit by Mark Joseph. It's really a phenomenal book. I met Mark a few years ago when I was leading worship for a parish mission that he was speaking at. And after the mission, we were talking for a little while, and he gave me a copy of this book. And it was so perfect for where I was at in my life at that time. And I think it's so perfect for so many of us. I've been working in ministry for years now, and I often fall into the temptation and the trap of always seeking the next thing. Always, just thinking ahead to the future, not staying present, not staying rooted in the moment. One of the biggest traps I think a lot of us ministry workers fall into is seeing God as our boss instead of our father, and trying to earn love. I don't know about you, but it's so easy to seek after love and to think that we can earn God's love, where really his love is a free gift. It's an unconditional aspect of who he is. And reading this book, Overwhelming Pursuit, it really helped me to put my perspective right. It really helped me to understand that I don't have to earn God's love. I don't have to keep chasing after these things. I can just be. I can be a human being, not a human doing. So I really recommend this book. Give it a shot. I think it'll speak to you where you're at. I think it'll lead you closer to your relationship with God. And also, the tagline of the book is to stop chasing your life and live. It really will. It'll help you to put aside, that mindset of always chasing after the next thing, always running after new goals and new dreams, and just accept God's love, accept God's forgiveness, accept God into your life, and to grow closer to him. So no matter where you're at in your spiritual journey, I think it'll speak to you. So give it a shot. God bless.
Thank you for joining us on Booked on Shalom World TV. We'll see you again next week with a new episode. Until then, happy reading.
You can't always.
This is the death.
Remarkably empty.
Turn back towards God. Rise up.